Hello, welcome to the interview here on France 24. Well, with a decisive win in the New York Republican primary, Donald Trump has reignited a presidential campaign that hadn't really seen a victory in a month. But even as he captured over 60% of the vote in his home state, trouncing his closest rival, Trump's trajectory to his party's nomination was anything but a sure thing. The prospect of an open party convention come July, Trump's nightmare scenario, still looms large. And it would be a convention in which the party that despises him, as Trump sees it, would be stealing his nomination. Would it really be stealing? Is Trump really as popular as he likes to claim? Who's really voting for him anyway? Who are these Americans? My guest today might be able to give us some insights. David Brady, joining us from Rome, is a senior fellow at the Hoover Institution. He's also a professor of political science at Stanford University's Graduate School of Business. Thank you very much for joining us, Mr. Brady. And I'll note for our viewers that you've written several books on the polarization in American politics, gridlock in Washington, so on and so forth. Trump, and Trump. You wrote recently that perhaps the worst way, a terrible way, to forecast U.S. presidential elections is by looking at whose campaign supporters are the loudest and taking it from there. On that basis, Trump must be actually doomed to lose. He has the loudest supporters.
Well, he does have a lot of supporters, but we run a poll, YouGov runs a poll where we interview the same 5,000 Americans each month. And while Trump's support among regular Republicans has gone up a little bit, his support among less affluent Republicans, those who make less than $50,000 and have high school or less degree, that's where his real backbone of the Trump support is. And my view is that that caps at somewhere around 40%, 45% across the country among Republicans. So he was benefited by a big field of 13 candidates, and he still benefits somewhat from the fact that there's 3 candidates in the race.
So what is it? I mean, is it too much media hype that we're attaching to Trump because of his outsized personality, so to speak? Are these cheering, rambunctious supporters we see at his rallies, are they not really representative of the Republicans in America?
I think there's certainly the plurality of the Republicans that are voting in this year's primary. Now, turnout is up a considerable amount, and he has pulled in some people who, say, 4 years ago would have said they were independents. Now they're saying they're Republicans. So Trump has been a force, and he has run his campaign. He has gotten more media coverage than all the other candidates in the Republican and Democratic parties combined as up through April 1st of this year.
I guess we're not helping matters any with this interview. But you mentioned the independent voters, and I'm curious, independent or perhaps swing voters, if you will, within the Republican Party, how big a constituency of Republicans are they? How many Republicans are looking at the Trump phenomenon, if you will, and absolutely appalled by it and wanting nothing to do with it?
So when there's 2 ways we try to get at that. We used to just do the favorable-unfavorable ratio, but that got so high in the country and even pretty high for a Republican. We turned to the question of would you consider voting for, and then gave them a list of candidates, or would you never consider voting for, no matter who he or she ran against? And Trump, on that level, has some 27% of Republicans who say they will not vote for him. Now, Republican women are more likely to say they won't vote for him, and Republican women with a college degree are even more likely to say they won't vote for him. But that's a pretty high percentage. So in our runoff of Hillary Clinton versus Donald Trump, we have only 73% of Republican identifiers saying they'll vote for Trump.
Could I ask you something? Now, okay, if it's not Trump, if it does go to a brokered convention, and I'm not saying it will happen, but what if Ted Cruz then is the candidate? Are those voters who you just mentioned who will not, under any circumstance, vote for Donald Trump, more inclined to vote for Ted Cruz?
Actually, it's about the same. Turns out that, so, you know, you'll get a few more people will say they would absolutely not vote for Trump. Then, so Trump is at 50 in the country, a sample of everybody in the country. 57% say they won't vote for Trump, but 50% say they won't vote for Cruz. Now you should understand that 57 and 50%, when you say, oh, I wouldn't support Trump, but then you don't like Hillary, you wouldn't expect 45% of the electorate not to vote. But these are the biggest numbers people saying that they would not vote for a candidate that I've seen in analyzing presidential elections for 50 years.
Let me ask you a very simple question right now. Even here, not in the U.S., you do not have to closely follow American politics to know that magic number 1,237, the delegate count that would give Donald Trump the majority that he would need to avoid an open convention. Do you see any way with the math at this point that he could get to that number and avoid an open convention?
It's going to be very close. His big win in the New York primary was quite helpful. He picked up 92 delegates. He still has to win of the remaining delegates in the April 26th and other primaries. He still has to win a little over 50% to, on his own, generate that number 1237. So my guess is that he probably will not absolutely be there. But if he's within 50 to 100, the period immediately before the convention, there's going to be a lot of bargaining. You may have noticed that he said the other day that he could take Mario Rubio as a vice president, that he liked John Kasich. Well, both of those people have over 150 delegates. So if they came over to him, that would solve the problem. One quick point for the audience. The last time this happened for either party was 1976. Gerald Ford did not have a majority going in. And Ronald Reagan, who finished second, he tried to get the nomination by nominating Richard Schweikert, who was a very liberal Republican governor of Pennsylvania. It didn't work, and Ford won. So there'll be a lot of negotiating. If he's within 100, I think he'll get it.
Who would be
on the first ballot?
If it, you know, the first ballot, he doesn't get on the first ballot, chaos breaks out, so to speak, at the Republican convention right now. Do you see the possibility of an outright revolt? Some of Trump's, rhetoric, his language in some of his rallies seems to suggest he wants to whip up his base against the system.
I think that's a very good point, and the way you put it, there would be chaos. I think Trump has to win it on the first ballot, I think, because as you pointed out, there's enough people that don't like him that if he can't win it on the first ballot by cutting the deal beforehand, then on the first ballot, 73% of Republican delegates are pledged to vote for the candidate that won their primary. But on the second ballot, 73% of them are free. And what happens on the second ballot is anybody's guess, because the way delegates are selected, just because you had to vote for Trump on the first ballot doesn't mean you have to vote for him on the second ballot. So it would be chaos then, and my guess is Trump would literally claim it was stolen from him, and it would bode very badly for the Republicans in the presidential election.
The prospect of a tense, to say the least, Republican convention shaping up. I read somewhere one Republican, I think, strategist saying that he found it quite maddening that he says Hillary Clinton is eminently beatable, he thinks, in November, pretty easily beatable. The problem is that the Republican Party is just running all of the wrong guys. Would you agree with that assessment? Are there people in the Republican Party you see having a good chance against Hillary Clinton?
Oh, I think John Kasich would have a better chance against her. I thought Mario Rubio would have. Jeb Bush would have. But in my view, it is the case that public opinion polls show that the two worst candidates to run against Hillary Clinton are Trump and Cruz. And Hillary Clinton has a lot of negatives. The American public hold negative views of her. But the fact is they hold more negative views of Trump and more negative views of Cruz. So all she has to do to win is not be Trump.
Be the un-Trump. David Brady, just a broad question for you. Sitting here in France, I get a lot of people sort of asking me that very basic question, looking at the U.S. election from the outside, especially the Trump phenomenon. They say, what is wrong with Americans? What's going on here? Are they racist? Are they prejudiced? Are they anti-women? What's the deal? How do you explain this to outsiders looking in?
Well, so in May and June when we ran our poll, Donald Trump was not a candidate on the poll. And so we looked at people, Republicans who thought that their economic situation had gotten worse over the last year. And of those people, that was some 38%, 40% of the whole party. It turns out that among those people, their first choice was no preference, and Scott Walker, governor of Wisconsin, had 13%. In July and August, when we went back, Trump had 43% of those people support. No other candidate had any. So basically, the less affluent who seem to think not seem to think, but who believe their economic situation has not gotten any better over the last year or two, they're the one. But I don't think that's just a U.S. phenomenon. That is a phenomenon in France with the Front National, the People's Party in Denmark, Five Star in Italy. This is, in my view, a phenomenon caused by globalization.
Absolutely, across the board phenomenon. But obviously, we've been speaking about Trump. David Brady, we've run out of time. An interesting election, obviously, in store, whatever the outcome. And a sense I'm getting that it's not so much angry voters voting for Trump, but people who are really just a little fed up, dispirited with the state of government there in America. I thank you for taking the time today to join us from Rome, senior fellow at the Hoover Institution. You've been watching the France 24 interview. Please stay tuned.